you served your country, whether military or spouse. Now you are stepping into a new and unfamiliar world. We would like to show you everyone's path is different through the stories of others in the military community. Grab your favorite beverage and prepare to listen to our next transition tale. Welcome to another episode of Transition Tales on the Live with Courage podcast. I'm here with my friend Quincy, who's going to tell us about his transition story. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Yeah. Well, first off, thanks, Christina, for being such a great friend and for starting your movement, right? Because I think it's very inspirational and motivational to hear some of the things that you're doing. And I'm proud of you. And I really, I'm looking forward to this. So Quincy Harper, retired Air Force after about 25 years, to where I did logistics, worked at the base chapel for a little bit, and then had the privilege to be a first sergeant for almost 6 years. I transitioned out back in 2015 after moving the family back to San Antonio, and we just started figuring it out. Some of the first people that I met, one of the first people that I met was Ray Domingo. I can remember my very first job fair out at the Holiday Inn by the airport. I walk in with my little suit on, and Ray had just went through his transition, and he was working at Wyndham Hotels, I think, at the time. He and I connected. We had a conversation, and I just kind of followed his path, transitioning out. What I would recommend to anyone transitioning out, after a significant amount of time, is to take, at least 30 days to find out, who you are, right? So I did that. I took 30 days, got to San Antonio November 5th, 2015. Took about 30 days. Around the middle of December, I decided to start job searching. Well, I responded to a job application for this company working in the HOA, the Homeowner Association industry. The job description spoke to everything I had kind of done over the course of my military career, which was people, resources, and facilities. I took that role, Christina. I took the interview, took charge of the programs, but I soon realized that it wasn't the industry for me. I did that job for about 10 months, excelled, made, decent salary, and could have made a career, I think, in that industry, but it wasn't my calling. It wasn't my lane that I was supposed to swim in. So I went and applied for another role. As you know, in the military community, there's all sorts of VSOs. So I was already connected with Goodwill and their veteran outreach program. And so I got my first job. Goodwill, once my counselor, Jennifer Ortega, realized that I was back on the job market, she pointed me toward American GI Forum and told me that I should, look into some of the services that they had. I went over and I met with their staff, their counselors, and they offered me a job, shortly after. So I housed homeless veterans for about 6 months. Throughout that process, I really started grasping what it was like to network and kind of find those and build those professional relationships. I met Chuck Bunch at a USO Pathfinder luncheon. I had met Cedric Brown and Bradley Albritton, the original Pathfinders, if you will, from San Antonio. And they kind of steered me in the direction of coming to work for the USO. So now I'm tapping into job fulfillment, my purpose, my calling, right? Because I'm housing homeless veterans, and now I'm working for the USO Pathfinder program. That has really been, I think, the bulk and the key of my relationships or my networking is just building those sound relationships in the community.
Can I stop you just for a second?
Yep.
I want to backtrack to something that you said. You said that you advise people to take 30 days off to figure out who they are. Like, what did you do in those 30 days?
That's a good question. I think I drove around every nook and cranny in San Antonio. My wife and I, it's funny because we both started working at the same time, December 15th, 16th of 2015, right? She chose to go back into the Air National Guard. And so we both were just kind of stuck in the apartment. The kids were at school. So we would go jogging on the Riverwalk. We would go have coffee. We would eat, Krispy Kreme donuts. It really gave us time to just kind of download, reconnect, revisit the city that we met in, and we decided to make our home. In short, we really didn't do a whole hell of a lot. but just work out, eat, and just enjoy each other's company.
It's almost like hitting like restart on your computer where it has to kind of refresh and get started back up. Okay, well
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, it's a part of the transition because now you just have that dead silent space to where you're not doing EPRs, you're not doing decorations, you're not doing tasks for your commander. You're just focusing on who you are and trying to fill up that white noise, that silent space in your life.
A lot of people don't do that though. They go from writing EPRs to writing their resume and
Yeah.
they just jump right into it.
Yeah, and that's
So,
and that brings up a good point. I went to an agency to get some assistance. It was a horrible experience, right? And I think that's what fueled my passion to assist in the military community, right? Because for probably 16 to 17 of the 25 years that I did in the military, I wrote EPRs and decorations, right? But now you're asking me to write a resume. So I was like a fish out of the water, right? It was overwhelming to me. It really created some anxiety because I wanted that perfection. I wanted it to look right. I realized that the free resume engine, that I was provided was giving me a cookie cutter resume. So I needed that assistance. And now I found myself in a place to where I wasn't necessarily getting that assistance because the individual told me, here's a template, go home and write your resume and come back. And I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So
yeah. So, but you went through TAP, right? So do you think that you, because TAP is like drinking from a fire hydrant. It really is. So do you think that maybe some of that stuff gets lost? That, I mean, they teach good stuff, but once you actually have to action on it, you're almost on your own and you forget stuff.
yeah, you are on your own. Part of the process to be signed off that you completed TAP, and to be able to out process the base was that you had to create a resume. I had no experience in it. It created some anxiety because in a sense, I was a perfectionist at EPRs and my writing in the military. So now you're asking me to write on myself. So I'm not going to say it was a joke, but it was just, I wasn't prepared to cross that hurdle.
Yeah, they really focus on the master resume more than anything. And it takes, I would say, practice. Just like write your first EPR that you write is not going to be amazing. So, my resume has taken so many different forms. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It keeps evolving.
Yeah.
And I'm always finding new ways to make it look better. So another question I have for you is, you said that, you kind of took this path of wanting to help others through transition because of your experiences. Do you also think your time as a first sergeant impacted that decision as well?
Oh, definitely. I was just sharing with a good friend of mine this morning. I was actually his first sergeant, back in Japan, that it was the greatest job that I probably ever had, in the military, right? There is no better way to serve than to serve others, right? And as a first sergeant, you're serving others 24/7, 365, right? When you think you have a minute to take a break, there's always some issue or someone waiting for you to jump in there and kind of assist them or shepherd them through a process. So that definitely prepared me for transitioning. So I'm very thankful for the time that to sit in the seat as an additional duty and then to go on to wear the diamond, right?
Right. I've only known you a little over a year, and I didn't know you had changed jobs so many times. There's this statistic that we change jobs like 7 times as veterans before we
Hmm.
get settled, and I didn't think that was you. Like, I thought you
Oh,
went from Pathfinder to like what you're doing now, and I was like, you're sitting here telling your story, and I'm like, I had no idea. And that's really what it's like. We don't know that the person sitting next to us at a networking event or in one of these workshops, that they're going through a similar process that we're going through, finding ourselves and changing jobs and trying to go from being military to civilian. And the process is similar but different for everybody.
yeah.
So I know Pathfinders wasn't the end of your story. So what happened after Pathfinders? What have you been doing?
After enduring the Pathfinder employment, if you will, I was actually with the USO for 2 years, but right at about a year and a half, I started hitting this roadblock, right? It's called compassion fatigue. And I realized that as a first sergeant, I had hit that. at a certain point as well, right? When you hear so many different stories over and over and over and time again, you develop compassion fatigue, right? It's not that you're a bad person. It's not that people's situations are bad. It's just you have to be able to unplug and take a break. About a year and a half into working for the USO and the Pathfinder program, um, there was no upward mobility. It was just compassion fatigue, right? And I got burned out. So I saw a job ad on Indeed, I think it was for a senior operations manager for the Culinary Institute of America, which is over in the Pearl. So I applied for the position. They reached out. There was a misconnect. I called and said, "Hey, you guys, I was here." And they were like, "Oh, there was a tropical storm in New York or something. We're going to be back in town." So I forgot about it. And about a month later, they reached back out and said, "Hey, can you come over and meet?" So I went over and met with them. We had a good conversation. And that's where I realized how to tell my story based on my experiences in the military. And that's what got me that position, right? Again, a significant amount of money. My boss was in California, his boss was in New York, and I had all things Texas. Day one, I walk in after leaving the USO, an individual had literally gotten drunk and passed out in one of the classrooms. So I automatically went back to first sergeant mode, and I realized that I didn't want to manage a staff like that. I didn't want to put myself in that type of position because I didn't really need to, right? So that was a red flag for me. I churned out, reached back out to the USO after about a week. And the first question that the director at the time asked was, "Hey, when do you want to come back?" And we kind of talked through that a little bit, what that would look like. And they graciously brought me back into the fold at the USO, right? So I was at the Culinary Institute for about 3 weeks, went back to the USO Pathfinder program, realized that there was still something missing. But again, because of my network, because of the professional relationships that I had built in the community, the manager at the time at Accenture Federal Services reached out to me. Well, part of the story goes, Chuck Bunch, Ray Domingo, Sam Domingo, and I, we started this movement called LinkedIn Mill City. Within LinkedIn Mill City, we hosted probably about 12 or 13 events to where we were community building, right? We were bringing employers, business leaders, entrepreneurs, volunteers all together at one single event each month for the sole purpose of helping them build their professional relationships. We were putting them in front of other veterans and military retirees and spouses who were influencers within different companies within the city. So through those relationships is how I got my position at Accenture Federal Services as the military recruiting liaison, if you will, to where I'm leading DC, San Antonio, and eventually San Antonio military hiring. I'm sorry, St. Louis military hiring endeavors, if you will. So it's just been all, Christina, embracing change, finding a mentor in the industry that you want to work in, understanding that access and exposure equals opportunity, building professional relationships, and then just understanding how you add value to the company, the endeavor, or to your tribe that you're around. That's been my keys to success.
What also sounds like understanding yourself as well, and accepting who you are. You know that you want to serve your community
Mm-hmm.
with the gifts and skills that you have.
Mm-hmm.
And you also know, hey, this is what I don't want to do. When you left that Culinary Institute, you're like, I don't want to be in this position anymore. I think that's a big lesson that some people have to learn the hard way, unfortunately, because we're so used to getting the mission done.
Yeah.
Okay, this is my job. This is what I'm going to do. And we forget that we have a choice now.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that because I get approached with opportunities a lot because of who I am. I want to help, but then I have to realize that I don't have the time to help. For me, I look at that as a negative when actually, like you mentioned, it's growth, right? It's understanding who you are. And it's being okay with saying no, and hopefully the person you're saying no to is okay with it and they understand as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We didn't know what no was in the
Yeah.
military.
Nope.
So out of that entire like amazing story that you told, and I'm so glad we did this because I learned so much more about you. What do you think was the most challenging aspect of your military transition for you?
Hmm, that's a good question. I think transition is an ongoing process, right? Because there's still, I will hit 5 years 5 years into retirement, February 1st, 2021, and I'm still learning. I'm still evolving. I'm still learning how to connect with the kids. I'm still learning how to connect with my wife. I'm still growing in that aspect, right? So I think that's probably been the most challenging. Financially, we've been okay. Health wise, we've been okay. But it's just now, you don't have that phone ringing, right? You don't have to wake up in the middle of the night and go do, an exercise, or, you don't have a million different priorities, right? If I have a million priorities, it's because I've kind of let that slowly creep up on me to where it's like, oh my goodness, I got to do X, Y, and Z today. So I think it's just really understanding who you are, separating yourself from the military, and just building it as you go. I have some friends, military colleagues who will still reach out to talk about military issues, and I clam up. It's like, dude, like that part of my life is over. I appreciate you coming to me with that, but really, the only person, I want to kind of talk through things about the military with is with my wife, because she's still in, right? So there's some issues that I can assist with her or assist her with, but for the most part, don't put me in Facebook military groups and expect me to chime in. I respect the 22 a day movement because I know it's real, but I tend to shy away from those things, and I tend to try to help in other areas by helping veterans find employment, by helping veterans or spouses talk through, different processes and giving them a different look through my story.
And that's okay. And I think that's something that we have to understand as a community, that everybody helps in their own way. And we don't all have to be on the same, for lack of better terms, bandwagon.
Exactly.
Um, and I think that's important because, you talk about the 22 a day. Yeah, we need to really focus on the fact that we have a suicide crisis, but there's many ways to combat that. And
Hmm.
like you said, you combated and to help veterans and military spouses become successful. So
Yes.
you're helping with a veteran success crisis that we have also that's not very talked about, which actually impacts our suicide rate. So you are doing your part. You are
Yeah.
taking care of your community in your own way. And I think it's important that we recognize that within each other and support each other. So you pretty much summed up your challenge and advice, but do you have any extra additional advice that you'd like to give anybody going through military transition?
I think again, the biggest thing is just embracing change, right? That is the tipping point for so many things when it comes to transitioning out of the military, right? Because the first thing they tell you to do is, jump on LinkedIn and be an active member, right? But it does no good if you're still in service stress in your profile picture, right? So that's telling me
Right.
that you haven't embraced change. So I think the first thing is just embrace change and find a mentor, and hopefully you can find a mentor in a business industry that you want to kind of tap into. If you want to be an entrepreneur, become an entrepreneur. You can do anything you want to once you transition out of the military. I mean, look at you. You're starting podcasts, right? You're starting blogs. You're helping other folks in the military community streamline their business processes and getting set up for LLCs or nonprofits, right? You took that challenge on because you saw the need within our military community. So it's about embracing change and letting it be okay to fail, right? Because you can site correct and you can move out and do whatever you want in the next.
Yeah, I've,
Next
I've
chapter.
failed so many times. I've embraced it so bad.
Yes, you
Like,
have.
oh, this is what we're doing now.
Yep.
Okay. Well,
Yep.
I really appreciate you being on this podcast to tell your story. In the beginning of the podcast, said a lot of kind words about me, and I actually kind of teared up a little bit. And I appreciate that so much too. I'm very grateful for meeting you and the relationship that we have developed. And not just the relationship, but the things that we've been accomplishing,
Mhm.
together has just been amazing. And I almost want to say that you kind of set me on my path of purpose again. I was a little lost when I met you.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciate that. And I think that is your gift,
Yeah.
is resetting people onto their path of purpose when they get a little lost. So I appreciate that. I appreciate your support in everything that I do. And just thank you for being the awesome you that you are.
Well, I appreciate that, and I hope and wish you nothing but more success. I mean, there's more business endeavors to come as we, evolve around COVID, as we evolve around, social injustice. I mean, there's a lot to be done, and it's funny. I was talking to my 11-year-old last night. We were talking about colleges and different things. She had to do a book report or slideshow, and the key takeaway from our conversation is you have to evolve and you have to adapt to the land that you're living in, right? You can't stay stagnant. You can't just focus on one thing. You have to have the mindset to evolve. And I think that's important, especially in our military community, because if you get stuck in a rut, there's potential to fall victim of that 22 a day. There's potential to fall victim to drugs or alcohol or, other coping mechanisms. And I've seen that within myself. So I have to evolve. I have to keep it moving. I have to continue to grow. And I'm very thankful for friends like you and Mo Watson and, good friends back home in Beaumont and Geronimo and Ray and Sam and Chuck, right? Franchetta Dyer. There's a whole laundry list of folks that I know that if I call, they'll pick up the phone.
Yeah, we have a good group here. I'm so grateful that I moved to San Antonio.
Yep.
So thank you so much for your time. I know you've got to get back to work, and I look forward to putting this podcast out. I'm so excited.
All
Have a
right.
good rest of your day.
You as well. Bye.